The Iranian situation is a case in point. That they hold our hostages is just absolutely and totally ridiculous. That this country sits back and allows a country such as Iran to hold our hostages, to my way of thinking, is a horror.
We hear, Imam, that today, perhaps today, some black hostages and some female hostages will be released from the American embassy compound. Is that true?
The freedom of the women and blacks will be given. Women are given great dignity in Islam, and the blacks have been oppressed in the United States. Great injustice was done unto them.
The Iranians have always been on the side of black Americans. Let's talk about it. I don't like bringing up race and the division that it causes, but this is a different point here. The point is that we have a habit of erasing history that is inconvenient in this country. For example, in Texas, now you see they're trying to erase slavery from textbooks. They're trying to tell kids that the slaves migrated to America and that they were happy on the plantations where they were getting free food and free shelter. But these evil people from the north came and took that away and made them go work for themselves. And when you confront these people about this complete ridiculous story they're trying to tell, they say, well, they don't want to traumatize the children. They don't want the children to hear about all this negative slavery thing and carry that burden into the future. But why not? Why not tell them the truth? Because those who do not know the truth, that do not know history, are doomed to repeat it.
In November 1979, one of the most dramatic diplomatic crises in modern history erupted when militants seized the US Embassy in Tehran, beginning what became known as the Iran hostage crisis. More than 60 Americans were captured, and eventually 52 were held hostage for 444 days during the standoff between Iran and the United States. But something unusual happened just days into the crisis. Iran revolutionary leadership ordered the release of 13 hostages, including all women and several African Americans. This decision sparked decades of debate. Why were these hostages released? What message was Iran trying to send to the world? And what does history actually tell us about the relationship between global politics, race, and propaganda during that moment?
The Iranian situation is a case in point. That they hold our hostages is just absolutely and totally ridiculous. That this country sits back and allows a country such as Iran to hold our hostages, to my way of thinking, is a horror. And I don't think they do it with other countries. I honestly don't think they do it with other countries.
Obviously, you're advocating that we should have gone in there with troops, etc., and brought our boys out.
I absolutely feel that, yes. I don't think there's any question, and there's no question in my mind.
No question in his mind. He sees things so clearly. That is 46 years ago, and he would ultimately deliver like the severe justice that the Iranian leadership deserved. And for the hostages and a million other things. Exporting terror all over the world, that's their brand. And of course, they tried to kill President Trump.
So it was November 4th, 1979, when the Islamic Republic of Iran stripped 52 Americans, their freedom, their dignity, and their pride.
52 hostages were held for 444 days in Iran from the end of 1979 until January 1981.
My father was William Q, and he was a hostage in Tehran. He was only supposed to be there for the weekend, and all hell broke loose.
They brought Iranian women to the front door and used them as shields as they broke through the American embassy. So I will never forget the human rights and what they did to the Iranian women then, and obviously what still goes on to this day. Through the broken windows, I can remember hearing the traffic start in the morning, peak, and then die. And there would be day 1, day 5, and you're sitting there thinking that you're forgotten.
From God
my family, and my country. And it was in that order that kept me alive and surviving through that.
We were released January 20th, 20 minutes after President Carter left office.
There's a difference between relations between the Iranian people and the Iranian government. They're two totally different things.
The people of Iran look more towards Western culture as something that they are interested in and enjoy. The regime obviously is opposed to the influence of Western culture in Iran.
The younger generations are coming up, and they're not in the same mindset. They want more freedom. They want to be out in the world, and they're being taken backwards now instead of being able to move forward.
I truly believe that there's many Iranians that would love better than what they have. So, as they would say in Iran, inshallah, with God's will, that might happen.
What is America's beef with Iran? Part 3. This is it. The 1979 Iranian Revolution and taking of American hostages. Remember, we left off in 1953 when the Americans and the British covert operation, take out the prime minister so Iran could nationalize their oil and all that, kept the Shah, the king, on the throne. Look how beautiful his wife is. Like, seriously, wow. Well, during the 50s, 60s, and 70s in Iran, it was a mixed bag. On the one hand, there was greater prosperity, infrastructure, education, a growing middle class, and westernization. But on the other hand, he ruled like a king with an iron fist and a police force, that would torture and kill you if you stepped out of line. He thought prosperity would be enough, but it was not. In 1978, it started just as normal protests against injustice, the rule of the Shah when he was heavy-handed, inequality, corruption, things like that. But then it escalates into a bigger revolution. Iran still has a democracy, and you can vote for the president and for the legislature and stuff, but it is considered the ultimate ruler of Iran would be Allah, would be God, through a religious representative, the Ayatollah, starting with the Ayatollah Khomeini. And yes, Sharia law. In the process, the U.S. Embassy is overtaken as there was a certain backlash against all the Western culture sort of associated with the Shah and things that had gone wrong. And a bunch of Americans were taken hostage for 444 days. My favorite part of this story is that they released the women and the African Americans, partly as a mercy and partly as a sort of F you America, y'all are really so racist and hypocritical. Remember, I'm simplifying because I have 3 minutes. So, yes, the Americans, the British are kicked out. They take back their oil industry. They change their government. And in America, there was the whole tying of the yellow ribbons around the trees for the hostages, and we could not extract them. Carter tried every possible kind of military move to extract them, didn't work, and eventually negotiates their release. None of them were killed. They were released, though the story is they were held back and didn't get to land in America until Reagan took office, so we kind of associate the release with Reagan. But my memory in third grade, there was an Iranian girl in my class named Farnoosh, a beautiful name which means like radiant sweetness, and at this time she changed her name to Stephanie. And I've just remembered that ever since. Like, she felt the pressure to become more American and sort of compromise that part of her identity. And I've wondered to this day what happened to her. And does she still go by Stephanie or Farnoosh? Please, please, please see the film Persepolis. It's animated. It's great.
Some of y'all might not understand this, but when the Iran hostages happened back in 79, because I do remember, they released all 13 black hostages. They said, you're not the enemy. They said that you already facing oppression back in America, so we don't have nothing to do against you. Let that sink in when you think about what goes on, the obvious blatant racism that Trump's administration, everything that's putting on, and DEIs and all the stuff. And I'm not knocking black folk that's in the military or what have you, but remember, if you don't understand your history, people watch from afar. The ones that have eyes. The Ayatollah and them were watching from afar. They know. When we talk about institutionalized systematic racism, we talk about that thing that happened at that BAFTA Awards in the UK with Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, and the guy had Tourette's and he yelled out the N-word, and they didn't have the decency to edit it out, but they edit everything else out. That is a reflection worldwide. That does not mean that other people didn't deserve to be free, but what they were sending the message from Iran is that black folks are not the enemy. Let me throw this at you in another way. Back when Muhammad Ali gave up his freedom and didn't want to fight in Vietnam War, spoke out against it. And he said, they're not my, I don't have any problem with them. That's not my enemy. See, because the war has always been from where you are in the States. You know, slave owner and the dog catchers trying to rally to get you. Not anywhere else. So when you go and sign up for places that you had no bearing of, that's what you have to keep in mind. The people that are really understanding this don't have to be preached to about the reality. They know. They know. So you think about the Iran hostage, that they know who they pick and who they get. But they say those 13 black folks had no bearing because they look in solid unity and say, you're not the what who we're fighting against. Let me put this in more modern day terms. They wouldn't necessarily look at Barack Obama as a problem as they would look at Donald J. Trump or Joe Biden. I'm just saying. You know, when you see people in places and situations, you have to understand the totality. You know, and they see it as white male authority trying to legislate, trying to conjure up tensions and beefs. Who does that? It's united in terms of what you pay into the such country that you're in and the taxes you pay. You don't have no united in terms of the protection because they still saw you as a slave. They still saw you as property. Don't see you as whole. So when you see that other countries are acknowledging, see, that's how the ignorance that goes on with a lot of places that people don't understand. Countries that have oppressed black folks have done it in such a blatant way that they act like other countries don't see. Now, there's other countries who can be racist and funny, time and jive. But if you ask them who's been the most oppressed and suppressed, they're going to tell you black folk. They're going to tell it 100. And I just find that very ironic that part of history during the Iran hostage, they released all 13 black Americans first. They said, you oppressed enough. We ain't got no beef with you. We got it with your country. Let that sink in for a moment. You really think that almost 50 years later that they're going to change different? Because they see what goes on. They see how the media portrays. They see how the divide is. They see what something like Trump does, how they always got quotas. And for people who are ignorant and think, oh, well, everything was resolved in the 60s. When you've had a so-called country, you've been over 400 plus years, and you brought your freedom from Britain 250 years ago, come the summer of 2026, and black folks have only had access to that in the last 60. You do the math and you tell me, do you think habits and mindsets are going to change when you've had separate water fountains, separate everything? And you think other countries don't see your game, your agenda? Do you really think that it's possible to put the blinders on? Because the denial is real in the Euro-based places. Denial ain't real in the people that see from afar. Because the ones who are close by choose rose-colored glasses. Wash your hands, keep your mind clear, watch out for another, share the video if you like, stay safe, stay blessed, stay woke, stay free. Now, I'm not ever going to say, because everyone deserves their freedoms. No one should be held against their will, etc. However, it said a lot that Iran knew the oppression that black people were facing to make it where all of them got allowed to be free. And think about it in the context of what we're seeing today. Because deja vu again. And who is all in these Epstein files? And who is the one starting unnecessary wars? And who is the one trying to have their class, their dignity, and their monarchies, etc., etc.? They don't look black. I'm out.
It's looking for an option, and Iran is a very convenient option for them to build back relationships that they've killed along with the attacks in Gaza.
If the reasons are different, does that still make one a proxy of the other? So Israel's objections to Iran, and it's the reason it sees Iran as a adversary, might differ from the United States. And there's a Venn diagram, there's some overlap, but there's also a tremendous amount that doesn't overlap. Right. Same thing with the Saudis, the Gulf states, other regional states that see Iran as a threat. They see it for different reasons. Does that still, and I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just trying to understand, does that still make them a proxy if their motives are different?
I would say yes, because it's not about the parts of the Venn diagram that don't overlap. It's about the parts that do. It's about the convenience of Israeli citizens dying, Israeli soldiers dying, Israeli weapons being spent. That's the benefit of a proxy conflict. It's not American citizens who are at risk. It's not American soldiers who are dying. It's not American weapons that are being spent. We get to build our surplus. And if anything, we get to build extra and sell it to Israel, which is benefiting our economy. So this is the uncomfortable truth behind proxy war is it's all the benefits of a wartime environment without any of the risks.
But then what also happens, and you can look at Vietnam as a great example, is the proxy wars that are supposed to be low cost for the United States end up blowing up into being a disaster for the United States.
So I think of Vietnam, I think classic proxy war, right? Right. Khrushchev gave that speech, I think 1963, whenever it was, about wars of national liberation, and that they would be fought in what was then called the Third World. Vietnam being a classic case. There I see absolutely, right? First you had the French, in French Indochina, and then the United States bailing the French out. Arguably the French were maybe a proxy for US interests. They were part of that firewall that were keeping the dominoes from falling. But again, I'm trying to understand the Israel-United States proxy angle here. And that's a unique definition of proxy, I guess.
I'll give you an example. I get butt in with an example. And you tell me if this is right or wrong.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, the Iraq War was a proxy war for the same reason.
The Iraq War,
George Bush and Dick Cheney's Iraq War.
Right.
We're trying to weaken Iran.
You think the Iraq War was an attempt to weaken Iran?
I mean, you pipe in here, but that's how it started. That was the original intention. And the deep, tragic irony is what we have now, which is Iran is running around.
Why does the United States want to weaken Iran?
The United States
because of what happened to your family in 1979.
But why? But why what's the beef the U.S. has with Iran?
Because they had our hostages for 400 and something days in 1979, and we will not let that go until that is,
How is that? What does justice look like?
I'm not saying that's.
Yeah. I'm saying why are we at war with Iran, or not at war, but why are we at conflict with Iran?
I mean, I think there's a lot of different valid answers for that. But where I would take this, especially to keep it really accessible to the layperson, right, is that the United States wants zero competition for being the single superpower in the world. It wants no competition for that. It wants to remain the single superpower everywhere, because being the single superpower gives your civilians, gives your population security, but it also means that you have the lion's share of all the resources in the world. And basic economics teaches us that all economics is based on resources. So Iran's goals to create a Shia state, to create a Shia crescent of power and influence across the Middle East, is in stark contrast to what would benefit the United States. What the United States wants is to maintain a Sunni majority, because that's where the oil is coming from, is majoritively for the United States, Sunni, wealthy, Khaliji states.
Even though Iran's the second largest.
Not for the United States.
Yeah, not for the United States.
But it was, right? During the United States' greatest period of prosperity, it was a bipolar world. So unipolarity is something we've had since the 90s onward. And yes, there's been tremendous success, but arguably unipolarity has been destabilizing.
The Iranians have always been on the side of black Americans. Let's talk about it. I don't like bringing up race and division that it causes, but this is a different point here. The point is that we have a habit of erasing history that is inconvenient in this country. For example, in Texas, now you see they're trying to erase slavery from textbooks. They're trying to tell kids that the slaves migrated to America and that they were happy on the plantations where they were getting free food and free shelter. But these evil people from the north came and took that away and made them go work for themselves. And when you confront these people about this complete ridiculous story they're trying to tell. They say, well, they don't want to traumatize the children. They don't want the children to hear about all this negative slavery thing and carry that burden into the future. But why not? Why not tell them the truth? Because those who do not know the truth, that do not know history, are doomed to repeat it. So in the time that I've been talking, I hope you've read what's highlighted above. Because they're going to tell you in the coming days, and people will start repeating how these people hate all Americans, and that they kidnapped these Americans in 1979 and held them for almost a year, and they wouldn't let them go, and it was terrible. That is not true. Read above. They let the black people go. Yeah, read it right there. He basically almost immediately let the black people go. Not, maybe it was political, maybe it was a sign to basically shake up America, but you will see there, the revolutionary Iran's proclamation that they've always supported marginalized and disenfranchised people, African Americans, holding black solidarity marches, commemorating Martin Luther King on a national postage stamp. Yes, they have always supported black Americans. And if you don't believe it, let me show you some evidence. This is a George Floyd vigil that was in Tehran. Right. They supported Black Lives Matter. You think this is just a government propaganda thing? Let me show you some more. Here you have protesters for Black Lives Matter in Iran, in Tehran. Read the sign, stop murdering black people. Right. So I'm not trying to drive a racial wedge. I'm pointing out that people tell a history that's convenient for them. And no, it's not convenient to know that these Iranians don't hate us. However, if you were to Google what happens to black people in Israel with, I don't know, forced sterilization and how they're treated, I've been there, it's not quite the same. Now, I've never been to Iran, and you can tell me if you've been to Iran that I'm completely wrong and they treat black people awfully. But that's not been my experience, not with my Persian friends. But, again, let me know what you know in the comments.
That same year, 1979, a group of college students get a crazy idea. What if we broke into, this is what they're saying, this is their dialogue, the U.S. Embassy, and we could get a hold of the CIA documents that show that the U.S. overthrew the democracy in '53. Then we could show the world, and maybe the United States would apologize for it. Well, most of the U.S. Embassy staff had already been evacuated. There were like 4 civilians left at that point, and they get word that the students are coming and they escape to the Canadian Embassy. But there's 66 CIA operatives still there, because Iran wasn't just the headquarters for the CIA operations in Iran. Iran was the headquarters for CIA operations in Asia. So basically everything from Turkey to China operated out of Tehran, to the point where we had the minting plates for $20 bills there. So San Francisco, Denver, Philadelphia, and Tehran. That's where we minted US money. Those are the official mints. Isn't that cool? Because the CIA needed the cash. Right? When it's overthrowing democracies, that's not cheap. You gotta pay for that stuff. $20 bills are a fantastic way to pay for everything, it turns out. The students climb over the wall and they capture the 66 CIA operatives in the act of shredding the documents. They had already gotten a bunch of the documents shredded. Those college students shove those shredded documents in garbage bags. They walk over to the nearby middle schools and high schools. They go, you guys like making puzzles, right? And they put the documents back together. In our words, piece by piece, we document how Kermit Roosevelt overthrew the democracy in 1953. The students go, here it is. They make copies, give it for free to the whole world. Too bad there wasn't an internet back then. They'd have loved that. They give it away to the whole world, free documents. And then they go, okay, President Carter, go ahead, apologize. No way. We're the United States of America. Even though we've lost wars, we'll never admit it. And we're definitely never going to apologize. And so we refused. Carter wasn't going to do it. So the students said, we won't release the hostages until you do. Carter's like, I don't care. Don't. Keep them, they're just CIA operatives, no one cares. And then the students go, but you know what else we have? We have the names of all your operatives in China, and in Southeast Asia, and in India, and in Pakistan. And you sure don't want to apologize? And Carter didn't do it. And so they published all of it. In an instant, the CIA is massacred. Not literally, they just had to pull all their operatives out of the field because now the Chinese knew their name and where they were. Now everybody knew their names and where they were. And so the CIA had to start over.
May this be one of the last videos I ever have to make about this terrorist regime that is on the verge of collapsing. But before we close out this chapter of doom, I do have to warn you about what's coming. First of all, this is not an attack. It is not an assault. It is not belligerence. It is not war. It is a rescue operation. It is not just a rescue operation of 90 million Iranians who overwhelmingly support the removal of this dictatorship. It is a rescue operation of the entire planet, of the Middle East, where this regime's proxies have terrorized from Israel to Gaza to Lebanon to Yemen to Syria to Iraq, of the Western world, where this regime has terrorized from Australia to Europe to the UK to the US. It is a freedom mission for humanity and democracy. That being said, it has never been more important to apply critical thinking. This regime is still engaging in a mind war to convince you otherwise. Anything that this regime reports has to be disregarded as unreliable. Why? Because there is no apparatus to confirm anything that it reports. There is no apparatus for democracy, for veracity, for truth. There is just a propaganda arm. There is no free press. There is no free speech. Whatever tells you is a carefully constructed narrative that they've been building for weeks, months, if not years. Please think carefully. As soon as this regime's basis was struck, it didn't report back to Western media that its officials had been killed. It reported back that Iranian schoolgirls had been killed. Why not just say that 2,000 starving infants in an orphanage had been massacred? And that same Western media, the same Western media that ignored when tens and thousands of protesters were slain by this regime, were the first to report its lies. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes you wonder, what side does Western media stand on anymore? Are you on the side of freedom? Are you on the side of truth? Are you on the side of humanity? Are you on the side of democracy? Or are you on the side of the terrorists? And if you didn't understand just how depraved this regime is, then understand this. After it slaughtered tens and thousands of protesters, their family members told us that they never gave those bodies back. Why? So that they could repurpose them later and claim them as casualties of war. I promise you that you do not understand the scale of the operation that we are dealing with here. You do not understand the mind war. Forget what the mouthpieces are saying to you. This is a watershed moment in history. It is a rescue operation for not just 90 million Iranians, but for the Middle East and for the entire world. And I don't care where you have stood up until now. I don't care how many times you believed the lies. I don't care how many times you ignored our cries. I don't care how many times you ignored humanity. All is forgiven. All I ask is that you stand on the right side of history today, because this is our moment. This is our liberation movement. This is the Iranian Independence Day. So stand with us now.
We hear, Imam, that today, perhaps today, some black hostages and some female hostages will be released from the American embassy compound. Is that true?
The freedom of the women and blacks will be given. Women are given great dignity in Islam, and the blacks have been oppressed in the United States. Great injustice was done unto them. They were under pressure in the United States. Thus they came here. We are doing this owing to the tenets of Islam. In return, we ask nothing for their freedom. We want the Shah. Carter must return him. The world's international law agree with this principle.
Let's unpack the real story. The hostage crisis happened during the aftermath of the Iran Revolution, which overthrew Iran's US-backed monarch, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. Many Iranians believed the United States had supported decades of repression under the Shah. When the Shah was allowed into the US for medical treatment in 1979, revolutionary students stormed the American embassy in Tehran, accusing the US of planning to restore him to power. That moment triggered a global crisis. 2 weeks after the embassy takeover, Iran revolutionary leader Ruhollah Khomeini ordered the release of 13 hostages. Those released were women and black Americans. Iranian authorities claimed they were freed because they were unlikely to be spies and were considered oppressed minorities in the United States. This decision served several purposes. First being propaganda strategy. Iran wanted to present its revolution as aligned with global anti-imperialist movement. By releasing black Americans, Iranian leaders attempted to signal solidarity with groups they believed were oppressed in the United States. Second being political messaging. The Iranian revolutionaries were trying to divide American public opinion. They framed their conflicts as being against US government power, not ordinary people. Third being international image. Iran was under global scrutiny. Releasing some hostages allowed leaders to claim humanitarian intentions while still holding others as leverage. The crisis lasted 444 days, making it one of the longest hostage situations involving diplomats in modern history. The remaining 52 hostages were finally released in January 1981 after negotiations mediated by Algeria through the Algiers Accords. The agreement included unfreezing Iranian assets, US promises not to interfere in Iranian affairs, and resolutions of financial disputes between the two countries. Some people interpret the early releases as proof of special treatment based on race, but historians generally view the decision as political theater during a propaganda battle between Iran and the United States. Iran's leaders wanted to frame their revolution as anti-imperialists, supportive of the oppressed groups worldwide, and morally superior to the US government. Releasing women and black Americans helped reinforce that narrative. The hostage crisis reshaped relations between Iran and the United States for decades. It led to economic sanction, diplomatic hostility, and decades of mistrust between the two nations. Even today, tensions between the US and Iran remains influenced by the events of 1979. The story of the 1979 hostage crisis reveals how international conflicts often involve propaganda, symbolism, and political messaging. The release of black American hostages was not simply about race. It was about global perception, revolutionary ideology, and the struggle for political legitimacy during a turbulent moment in world history. Understanding that context helps explain one of the most unusual decisions during one of the most dramatic diplomatic crises of the 20th century. What do you think about the historical decision to release some hostages during the crisis? Talk to me in the comment sections. Thank you for watching. This is Mercy Realities.